can move to the next page. So good evening and welcome everybody to the August edition of JoziPUG Meetup. Hope you're all keeping safe and well at the moment. Just some quick logistics. Make sure your microphone is on mute unless you're asking a question. If you do want to ask anything, just let us know who's talking. Just do a brief intro so we know who is speaking at that time. Otherwise, use the raise hands feature or pop your questions into the meeting chat. We will be keeping an eye on it. Okay. Where are the restrooms? Well, anywhere where you want, David. Okay, so the agenda for tonight, I'm just going to take everyone through what's in the news, some new items that are coming in. You're definitely going to see a trend around some of the new items which we are announcing or that are busy coming out. Then Michael is going to take us through Dataflex and Dataflex Pro. Though those names are going to change, I think Michael will explain a bit more detail into what's going on to there. Next, David is going to take us through a Power Platform template. It's the return to workplace template, similar to how we had our template for the COVID response when it initially happened. We've also now released a return to workplace template, which covers a bunch of Power BI dashboards as well as some Power Apps to help track that returning to the workplace scenario. Then Mike's going to take us through, I think he might have some questions lined up, or we'll just finish off with some general questions and discussions. If there is anything anyone wants to know or wants to share, please feel free to do so during that time. Okay. Anything from anyone before we kick off? David, from your side?
No, all happy.
Mike, you all good? Welcome, Manuel. I see you got the gifts going again. Okay, so let's just go over some of the news items that are coming in. So really exciting. The general availability has been announced of the Power Platform build tools. Now, the build tools have been part of Azure DevOps for a while now, but in a preview experience. Now we are moving them to general availability. What this means is you can start utilizing these tools to, if you are working in a DevOps environment and you want to make sure you are following full application lifecycle management, the tools are now GA, so you can start using them with confidence in the platform. Okay. So that's really exciting. I mean, it's been around for quite a number of months. There's lots of people already making use for it or use of it. So now you can start leveraging that as well. Let's go back to the next one. So another way we're announcing that's coming is the ability to easily build responsive Canvas apps using a new container control. So we've mentioned it a couple of times in a number of our sessions, what you need to do in order to make your applications responsive and adaptive, depending on whether you're viewing them in portrait or landscape or on a mobile device or on your desktop. There's a lot of calculations that you need to do when you're going to lay out your controls and your items on your screen. But using these new container controls, these are templates that have already been designed to be responsive. So all that means is you're going to drag and drop the controls into those controls, and it's going to auto lay out the screen for you on your behalf. This makes it a lot easier for all of us to build a lot more responsive, a lot more adaptive applications. I know this has been an ask since the very beginning. I mean, every time I'm running Power Apps workshops and that, people always complain that they have to either build one or the other. I'm like, well, you don't have to. You can go and build a response, but there's a lot of things that you need to do in order to get that right. Now we're bringing it in, it just makes it a lot easier to do. Now, we're also announcing mobile push notifications for model-driven apps. Push notifications have been around for Canvas-based apps for a while. Now it is going to be possible to also have push notifications for model-driven apps. So whether it's getting updated by some process that you have going on in the back end, or if you want to see when some items have been updated or someone's updated some information on an item, those push notifications are also going to be coming through. It doesn't really mean much, but this is also a premium feature, but usually when you are using model-driven apps, you already have that premium license capabilities available. Now, we've also made it easier to package solutions for Microsoft Teams. So when you are working inside Power Apps, there is a solutions section, and that gives you the ability to bundle a bunch of solutions, flows, Power Apps, and a number of items into one container. Now, inside that container, in the Solutions Hub, you have the ability to export everything in that solution to become a template that you can then import into Microsoft Teams, into that app catalog. What's also really great about this is you have the ability to use environment variables. So when the person is adding that application to their team site, they can go and configure items for those variables to make it a lot more adaptive for what they are doing. Okay. What slide are you seeing at the moment, Mike? I'm going to prevent anyone from moving it so that you should be able to see it on the side. Okay.
I'm on slide 123.
Okay, that helps.
No, it's all working now. I don't know what's happened. I clicked forward and backwards, and then it said, go to the presenter slide. I did that and now it's back. So I'm all good.
Okay.
Sorry to miss you.
I've stopped people from moving through. So now for people like you, it should be okay.
Okay, cool. Cheers.
Okay, so with these environment variables, what that means is when you import the app, you can go and set those variables for your environment, for your team site, depending on what type of app you are choosing. So when you are designing these applications, you have the ability to make them highly configurable for the users that are going to be making use of them, and makes it very easy for them to do. Next one is customizing apps in the Microsoft Teams store. So from Microsoft Teams, you are going to be able to have the ability to see which apps are Power Apps, which ones are customizable. So you would be able to download them, add them into your Teams channels, and then be able to customize them a bit more to add a bit more functionality to it or change the layout. And you are going to be able to be doing this directly in Microsoft Teams. There is a lot of integration that we're doing with the Power Platform and Microsoft Teams at the moment. And you'll see the next couple of announcements that we're going through are covering all of these new things that are coming out. There are many more, and Michael's going to be covering some of the Dataflex stuff, which is also on top of that item as well. Now, with the ability to build apps in Microsoft Teams with modern controls, we have now launched a bunch of controls to help it be a bit more native and have that Microsoft Teams feel for these applications. So the current controls that are available are labels, buttons, text box, combo box, radio box, checkbox, toggle, date picker, shapes, ratings, as well as sliders. So this is just going to help give you a bit more control when you are building apps with inside Teams and help make it a bit more real for you, especially those canvas-based apps. Lastly, we got a very low response from the PVA workshop in a day last time. I think I only got 4 responses. So if you are interested in Power Virtual Agents, what we're going to do is I'll leave this up now. Just copy that link and then just request, put your info in, and we will add you to the list. I will be also posting it onto the Meetup .com site after this meeting tonight. If we can get enough people registered, we will look at doing it. It is either going to be an evening session or a weekend session. So there is an option for you to choose which one you would prefer, and then we're going to see what the bulk is, and then we'll choose that day at the end of the day. So this is for Power Virtual Agents, similar to App in a Day, Dashboard in a Day, Power Automate in a Day workshops. This is focused primarily on the virtual agents, so the conversational agents component of the Power Platform. So if you are interested, register on there, please, and then we'll look at setting that up in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so that's all I've got from my side. David, Mark, anyone else got anything interesting that they've seen or they want to share, some news that's coming this way?
No, all happy from this side. I don't want to say too much now because then I don't have anything to say in my presentation.
Okay, no, perfect. Okay, so great. So with that, Mike, I'm going to hand over to you.
Why, thank you. Why, thank you. Let me share.
We'll just post that link in the website for anyone who wants to register.
There we go.
Yeah, up on the side.
Okay, cool. And Jonathan, you can see my amazingly green slide, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool, Vince. Awesome. Right. So what I wanted to do was just spend a few minutes on these announcements that were that Microsoft made in July around this new, in quotes, this new technology called DataFlex. So let me talk about what was announced, and then I'll go into a little bit more details on what that is. So essentially, the first thing that was announced is that the Common Data Service was being rebranded or renamed to DataFlex Pro. And that's it. It was literally an announcement of a rename. No features of the Common Data Service change, no licensing changes, literally just the name. So it goes from Common Data Service to DataFlex Pro. So that was the first announcement. The second announcement was that Microsoft is introducing a trimmed down version of the Common Data Service, or what was rebranded now to DataFlex Pro. So a trimmed down version, like in my brain, I think of this as CDS Lite. Not sure that's the right way to think of it, but it's CDS, but with less capabilities. And that was going to be called DataFlex. So we'd now have DataFlex Pro and DataFlex. And DataFlex, or CDS Lite, is designed for usage from within Microsoft Teams only. So it's a cut down set of features designed so that you can build apps that run inside of a team that need to use data storage and the constructs of CDS. And that's all pretty cool. And I'll go into specific feature differences of what this means. And I guess the other thing just to note is what this would mean is DataFlex, or CDS Lite, is accessible through Microsoft Teams, but also Microsoft Teams only. So it's really designed for apps that run in Teams only. It means you can get access to this features of CDS without needing an additional license as well. So I wouldn't need to go and get a premium version of Power Apps or Dynamics 365, and I'd get access to the scale and the relationship models that CDS provides to me. So that is what was announced in July. Subsequently, actually this morning, I noticed that the blog articles, the public blog articles associated to these are no longer there. And all the naming that says DataFlex Pro and DataFlex in Microsoft's public documentation has changed back to CDS. So I don't want to speculate on what it is, but let's just assume that it is still DataFlex Pro and DataFlex. The intentions are still to launch this new version of CDS, or this trimmed down version of CDS. The names might change. I think there might be some debates going on around the actual names, but that doesn't really matter. It's still around the intention of having this version of CDS, which is trimmed down, which is designed to run inside of Microsoft Teams. So that's really what the focus of the next slide is. So kind of like, what does that mean for me? You know, give me a little bit more detail about this trimmed down version of CDS. So I've said most of this. There's a few important points here. The one is that it will allow you to have custom entities, so you can go and create your own entities or tables, if you want to call them that, just like a normal CDS, with fields and relationships. It will include one out-of-the-box entity by default initially, and the plan is to have more, and that is essentially like a user's entity. It won't have entities like you get in Dynamics 365, for example, contacts and accounts and leads and opportunities and all those types of things. That's not the plan initially to have those. So it really is about building a custom app with a custom data structure. And so you would go and define your own entities, your tables, and your fields. The other important thing to understand is that the only connectors essentially, well, actually, let me take a step back. So that's like the data structure behind what I would go and build an app that runs inside of a team. But also the intention is to allow you to actually build a Power App that runs inside of a team. And when you build that Power App, the authoring environment is actually inside of teams. So I go into a team and I can actually build an app, and the authoring environment is Power Apps. And that Power App that I build can now connect to this new CDS Lite, as well as Office 365 connectors if I've got an Office 365 license. So I still won't get the premium connectors in an app that I build inside of Teams, but I will now be able to connect to the CDS Lite, or let's call it DataFlex, as well as the traditional Office 365 connectors, and I guess the standard connectors as well. In terms of permissions, this new lightweight version of CDS is going to use the constructs and the roles that come with Teams. So in Teams, you have an owner and you have a member and you have a guest. So those are the types of roles that you could then give permissions to inside of the CDS construct, whether that's entities or possibly even down to, I guess, row level permissions, but I'm not too sure on that. And another thing to note is it won't support the extensibility features around integration that full-blown CDS does. So for example, today you can write something called a plugin that fires when records land into CDS, or you can connect CDS up to webhooks or use webhooks from CDS. You can create service bus connections into Azure Service Bus and all these other integration points. Those won't be there either. So it's kind of like this contained data structure that's available just for a team. In actual fact, behind the scenes, when you create a team, it creates an environment, a CDS environment, just for that team. So you can end up with many, many environments. But that environment is a special type of environment which has the trimmed down version of CDS as opposed to a full-blown version of CDS. Another question I've been getting quite a bit of is, so show it to me. I can't. I don't think many people can because it's not in public preview yet. So Microsoft hasn't announced when it's going to be available as a public preview, but my understanding is it's not too far away. And then you would be able to, inside of a team, go and start creating apps, creating these entities, defining your field structures. And actually, there's even going to be a user interface for CRUD operations if you just want to start adding rows of data, deleting rows of data, just straight at a data level inside of this new version of CDS, this lightweight version, which may or may not be called DataFlex. So that's what I have to share. I don't know if there's any questions at this stage.
Mike, do you know if that environment, so the storage of that is not going to account to your normal capacity, right? So it's not going to account for your normal capacity in the Power Platform. Yeah,
that's my understanding. It also will be limited though. So I can't remember, and I might be talking rubbish, so please don't, go and share this with the world. But I remember somewhere hearing it's got a gig capacity limit by default. But because it's all preview and we haven't seen it yet, that could change if indeed I'm actually talking nonsense. But I do believe there will be some type of cap. So it won't be, you can have a 14 terabyte DataFlex environment for a team. Initially, I think it's going to be capped at about 1 gig, but I might be a bit wrong there.
Yeah, so in CDS or DataFlex Pro, you can have unlimited space, where in Teams you're limited and you can't buy more. So even if, like in CDS, if you have 10 gigs available and you need extra space, you can buy additional space, where you won't be able to do that in DataFlex, the light version. And then I also think it's limited at 1 million records or 1 million
Yes.
rows.
Yep. Yeah.
in
Yeah. That sounds familiar as well.
With Dataflex, yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is, like, these are initial metrics or data points. They may change, because I mean, we're not even in public preview yet. So as things change, by the time it's generally available, maybe they're bigger, maybe they're smaller. But yeah, that was the initial guidance. Yeah, you're 100% right.
So what's quite funny is during the launch, some of the guys were making jokes and saying, "Are you sure this is going to be the name now?" So we don't end up renaming it like Power Apps and Power Automate. And then,
yes. Yeah. So look, I mean, the naming is all speculation. In my mind, I always thought of it as, okay, we've got traditional CDS that we all know, and then we've got this new thing called, in my mind, it was CDS Lite, but the official branding was Dataflex Pro and Dataflex. But now it looks like just maybe those names might change again. But be that what is, like, it doesn't really affect us too much, because it's really early days. It's just nice to know that we're getting the CDS environment for Teams, because one of the things I really struggle with today is I want to build this app, and maybe the organization doesn't have access to Teams, so they start using SharePoint lists, and then we hit all these delegation issues, where it just doesn't return the number of rows I need, and I have performance issues. Like, SharePoint lists is just not the best place for bigger types of data sets. So yeah, so it's pretty cool to get access to a CDS type of construct inside of Teams for customers that don't own CDS. So I think that's really cool, and that's, I think, the important point to know.
all right, and Mike, and then Karika has a question for you. She's saying, don't know if it was mentioned yet, sorry if it was, but what's the difference between Microsoft Lists and Dataflex Lite, and which to use when?
Well, Hona, that's a great question.
Yeah,
that's a great question.
She specifically said, I've got a question for Michael.
Look, I'll give it a shot. This isn't an official answer, but I think of Microsoft Lists as an evolution of SharePoint lists, and also bringing them into Teams. Although when you bring them into Teams, it's very often that you're going to use the out-of-the-box user interface that they provide, with some styling and conditional formatting, almost like, I guess, you get in Excel, and even in SharePoint lists today, you get a good level of conditional formatting. But really, it's like, I want a list, but I actually want to see the list, and I want the out-of-the-box quotes UI that comes with that list. So I think of Microsoft Lists as the evolution of SharePoint lists. There's still going to be limitations, I'm sure, but I don't know this for a fact, around like delegation and huge amounts of data for Power Apps to read data from here. So CDS, or this new Dataflex, or CDS Lite, whatever you want to call it, is still going to, I think, be more the more scalable model, maybe the more performant model. The way the Power Apps talk to the CDS data structure is quite interesting. It's definitely more performant than SharePoint lists, and I guess then the evolution of Microsoft lists. And it's not designed to be shown directly to the user. It's designed to be the data structure behind an application, or a workflow, or a virtual agent, or something like that. So it's more, I guess, more like CDS, more like kind of like SQL or a database backend, where you're not actually going to give that to the user as the front end, whereas Microsoft Lists you would. So that's my perspective. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything there.
Yeah, I think that's
Thanks,
definitely.
Michael.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
I think that's good for the official Microsoft answer.
I'm not sure about that, but it's so confusing. I also, when it's like, oh no, it's going to be hard to explain. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, as well as you're not going to be building a model-driven app on a Microsoft list.
No.
You're also not going to be building a Canvas app on a Microsoft list. So you're still going to be talking Canvas app back to a SharePoint list. I think so. Well, for the time being,
Yeah.
at least. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's going to change.
I think absolutely you would build a Canvas app on top of a Microsoft list. I think
Do you
absolutely
know if
you
you can do that?
I'm not saying you can do it today, but I'm saying
Okay.
you would. So, you know,
Yeah,
as
that'll make
Microsoft
sense.
lists are the evolution of SharePoint lists, you know, absolutely, I believe that's the case.
Cool.
Yeah. And so with that, I hope I didn't confuse too many people. But yeah, watch the space, and as I'm sure in next month's community call, we'll probably have more information to share on naming, if there's any naming changes, and hopefully more insights on when the public preview is available, so we can start playing with it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
My pleasure.
It would have been great to see a demo.
I know. It would have been.
Yeah, I was speaking to one of the PMs. There's very limited private preview, only for some US and some EU customers at the moment. So hopefully soon we will start to be able to play around with it. Awesome.
I definitely like where that's going, because I think that CDS, or now Dataflex, or whatever they're going to call this, is definitely has a huge amount of value. But unfortunately, you know, for people who don't have standalone licenses, you know, it's quite a big jump to get to CDS, where I think this is definitely a step in the right direction for getting it with Teams as well.
It's also going to be interesting to see what the migration path is going to be when you start hitting limits in the CDS Lite, how you can migrate that into entities into CDS. It will be interesting to see.
I'm sure that will be very well planned from Microsoft, so I don't think that's going to be a problem at all.
Is this hand button in Teams to give you a high five? Is that what it's for?
Yeah, we can use it as that. Perfect. Thanks for that, Mike. Appreciate it. David, over
I just
to you.
gave Mike a high five.
Yeah, I returned it.
Thanks, man. All right, so is it my turn? Michael and Jonathan, don't turn off your videos, because then it feels like I'm talking to no one. Let me at least. Mike, where are you?
I can't
Switzerland.
It's beautiful, man.
It is, and it's still sunny here as well, so it's pretty cool.
Probably cold as well.
Nah, Northern Hemisphere, warm.
All right, excellent. So let me get my screen share going. Yeah, no, same here, Manuel. Yeah, I agree. I follow you. All right, excellent. So, perfect. So like Jonathan said, Microsoft released this application called Return to Work, and I think this is a challenge a lot of companies are dealing with at the moment. Is, you know, obviously people are now working remotely, and how do we scale, and how do we manage and monitor, and how do we measure the cadence for people returning back into the office now? So I think this is the timing for this thing is absolutely phenomenal, and I think this is going to be a huge hit for the Power Platform. So if you haven't seen it before, you can go to aka.ms/RTW, which stands for Return to Work. So that would have been just an ugly URL if it was Return to Work, or Return to Workplace, sorry. So essentially that's going to take you through to this site over here. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you can go and watch some videos. You'll see all of these things are very nicely presented. Really is a professional looking app. So at the bottom, you can go and say download the solution, which is going to take you to that section. Or if you scroll down more, you'll see at the bottom, you can contact sales and these sort of things if you don't have the necessary licensing. So unfortunately, you do need a standalone license to run this model-driven app. I know that there were talks originally, or back when COVID just hit, where Microsoft announced that it was going to give the COVID app, which also used model-driven apps in CDS, that it's going to make that available to companies. I haven't seen that the same is true for this app though. So Michael, I don't know if you and Jonathan have heard anything on that front. I haven't been able to confirm that, because one of the prerequisites that it does say over here, if you click on download the solution, is that you do need a standalone license. So you say you must have a Power Apps and Power BI license. Now, I'm not too sure if that is a standalone license or if that is 365 seeded license.
As
Yes,
far as I know, there is a single app that the user would use, and that would require the Power Apps, so the Office 365 user license, if I remember correctly, that we were giving for that one.
Yeah, so maybe I can clarify this. The return to workplace solution, everything's in the CDS. And so from a Power Apps perspective, every user would need a premium license. You could potentially use the Power App per premium per app license as opposed to the per user license. The Power BI side, you would need Pro for anyone that's consuming the dashboards. And in terms of Microsoft making available trial licenses, what Microsoft did at the beginning of COVID is they offered customers a 6-month trial on Power Apps premium licenses to support a specific solution that we had around at that point in time. And customers that signed up for that would still be able to use those licenses for this. But it doesn't look like Microsoft is making available brand new sets of trial licenses in a similar offer that was around before. So yeah, so it's as far as I can see and everything that's been communicated to me, customers will have to have the appropriate licensing to be able to use the solution.
Yeah, and I think that I've got a feeling the licensing is going to become less and less of an issue going forward, because a lot of the companies that we're talking to, it's sort of in their budgetary plans to at some stage get Power Apps standalone licenses. And I think at that stage, these discussions are just going to become a lot more easier, where you have a solution, you don't have to worry about what they have and what they don't have. We can go and implement the solutions like this one, for an example. Right, so...
Sorry, David, there's a question from Simon.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you mean by a standalone license. I know you've got Power BI and you've got Power BI Pro. Are you talking about Power BI Pro?
I think you're asking about the standard license. Sorry, Simon, your microphone's very soft.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Better.
Sorry. The standalone license, is that Power BI Pro as opposed to just Power BI? And
Yes, correct.
so that comes with the E5 SKU, doesn't it? So if you are on Office 365 and you've got E5, then you get Power BI Pro with it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But there is a per app license or the Power Apps premium license that you get as well, if you want to connect to CDS and do model-driven apps and those sort of premium features.
I love the licensing of all this. It's very confusing.
Yeah, which this requires. So Power BI Pro is required for anyone who's viewing the dashboards, the Power BI dashboards. And then for anyone that's using the Power Apps, whether it's the model-driven or the Canvas apps, they need a Power Apps Premium a license, which doesn't come with E5. It's a separate license.
Okay.
Any questions, Simon? Does that clarify it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So I think there's a 26-page document that discusses the licensing in detail on Power Platform. Let me know if you don't have that. I can
I appreciate that. Yeah, that'd be great. So
I can send it to you for some For some
Fantastic.
light bedtime reading. Yeah.
Put me to sleep tonight. Thanks.
All right. So
yeah, I heard they're releasing a competency for that as well.
all right. So basically, these are the steps that we're going to go through. Well, not going to go through now in order to install the installation or install the solution. So they reckon it's going to take us about 60 minutes, and I'd say that's roughly accurate. But what's definitely going to take longer is to do the training and making sure that people understand how to use the system. That's definitely going to take a significant amount of time, longer than 60 minutes. But let's get cracking. Let's show you what we've done. So at the bottom, we've got view documentation, and then if you scroll down, you can just go and get the solution. So if you're a real techie, you're first going to go and click on Get It Now, and then you're going to come back to the documentation. I just start with the documentation. It just makes it easier. Right. So
just a bit of advice: read the manual, read the steps to complete it. Both Mike and I ran into the exact same issue, and it was because we didn't read the manual.
oh, did you guys install this as well?
Yeah, no, I've got it up and running in my environment as well.
Out of interest sake, which step was that?
When you're busy authenticating the connectors to the GitHub repository.
Yeah, and I have a list of caveats, and that's one of them.
Okay.
Where they're telling you to check where the URL is pointing, and I'm like, but I just told you where it's pointing. It should be pointing to CDS. What are you on about? But anyway, so we'll get to that.
Yeah.
All right. So in essence, there are these steps that they outline, and if you follow this, it's pretty self-explanatory. At the end of this process, session, we'll take you through some of the challenges that we've had, or possible challenges that I think might come up. And one of them is the roles. And so Michael mentioned the roles on CDS earlier. So there are some things to just consider when it comes to roles as well, which we'll discuss. But in essence, this is what the application looks like. So if you finished installing it, and you'll see that you've got a facilities management application, and the whole solution is really split into two. So on the one side, you've got how do you prepare your facilities and your infrastructure and making sure you've got the right policies and the right things in place in order to open up certain facilities. And this is hugely powerful. If you think about large organizations that have multiple buildings, multiple office spaces, and you now need to be in a position to decide which of these are ready to start accepting employees. So that's on the one side, and you'll see there's the facility app for that. And then the other side is then everything to do with the employees. So there is where you can keep track of your employees' sentiments and making sure everybody's happy and smiling and nobody's getting sick. And if there are people that have been diagnosed with COVID, where you can actually have a bit of a process to make sure that your HR representatives and your safety representatives engage with this individual in the correct fashion. So we're going to start off with the facilities, and in the facilities application, you'll see at the bottom, if we go and switch to solution setup, it's got a whole lot of configuration and settings that you can do. A lot of them come pre-configured, and a lot of them also contain demo data. So just keep that in mind. So first install this in a development or in a testing environment. Otherwise, you're going to have to go and clean up this environment afterwards. So you can go and set up your countries, states, types of facilities. So for example, buildings, data centers, parking space, facility groups. So here you can group the facilities in any logical way that you'd like, depending on the organization. In the demo data, this has been grouped by country, and so this is obviously aimed for a large multinational. Then you can go and set up your facilities in here. I'm not going to go through this process because I'll show it in the actual front end of the application, not in the setup area. But here you can go and load the facilities, whether it's a building or a data center or whatever the case may be that you might want to track throughout this process. Then there's this thing called readiness categories, and this is where you can group all of your different readiness factors into high-level categories. So you'll see that you've got things like return to office target population, medical, legal, and expert assessment. So there's a high-level umbrella for all of your different factors. Then you can go and list your employees, which depending on your CDS structure, it'll automatically pull it in as contacts. Then under phase planning, this is quite interesting, and a lot of the solution is built around this concept to go and say, these are the different levels or phases that you're going to go through in order to go from a closed environment or a closed facility into a new or a fully functional new normal. Now, I think at this stage, nobody really knows what new normal is going to look like. But essentially, when we get to phase 4, then you can go and define those readiness factors. That's going to basically categorize a phase 4. Then you can go and list key metrics that you want to use throughout the process. So things that you want to keep a tap on. So a number of COVID cases a day, deaths per day, employees in the workplace, and these sort of things. So you can go and add to these as well as you see fit. Most of the things that I'm showing you now comes pre-set up. So a lot of these categories and everything already, just ships out of the box, which makes it a lot easier to turn the solution on. And then also the readiness factor. So there's a whole string of things that is grouped by a readiness category. So you will see that there are all of the management tasks or management factors. So is the building security support and shift availability been adjusted accordingly, the cafeterias and so on and so forth. So there are quite a few of these, and it's like I said, all of this comes pre-set up out of the box. Any questions so far? If you have any questions, just shout at me and turn your mute off and go ahead and ask.
Where did all these factors come from? Are they a global agreement? Are they a global sort of? Have they come from some authority, or has Microsoft come up?
Sorry, is it Simon speaking?
I'm sorry, it's my microphone again. Where have these factors? Cool. Where have these factors come from? Have they come from the World Health Organization and or some other organization? Who came up with all these factors?
I'm not 100% sure. What I did read was that Microsoft worked together with a couple of companies to develop the solution. So I'd assume the WHO definitely had a hand in this, or some of these things have been released by them. So, but I saw that as in part of the documentation, they're also mentioning a few companies that have already used the solution. So I assume that Microsoft developed it in conjunction with these customers.
It's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of info in here,
There's a lot of work gone into this.
Absolutely.
And you can also consider some of this data as like getting started data. So, for example, the phases, I think of these readiness factors as like checklists. So in order to open a facility, you need to have done, do you have hand sanitizers? Do you have a check-in procedure? Do you have a procedure to clean the facility, etc.? So they're more like checklist items to me. And these are getting started ones, but an organization will most likely look at this, especially a South African organization, and go, okay, we don't want that, but we do want this, and we want some additional things. And then also the same goes for the reopening phases or the categorization of these checklists. So it's all, it's just data. So you can go in here, you can delete them, add them, and all the reports and dashboards would update accordingly.
Yeah, and I can see some of them are marked as sort of for Canada legal reasons or something. Or some of them marked for, they've obviously been put in for sort of certain areas. I saw China in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great.
So you can easily go and add your own, like Michael said, you can go and add your own categories, factors, phases, everything that I showed you now, you can go and customize to your requirement. All right, so that takes care of the solution setup. So that's all that you need to do in order to get this up and running. If you now go back into the facility area, I can now go and actually load a facility. So if we're going to say new facility, you'll see it's got a business process assigned to the various phases that they foresee you to go through. So this business process is going to help you go from 0 to 4 or 0 to hero, and it really guides you throughout the process. So on the first page or the first tab, you've got the integration done with Power BI. So this is now actually pulling one of the Power BI reports and embedding this in the Canvas app, in the model-driven app, which is very, very cool. And the idea with this is, look, this is a brand new facility that we're now setting up, so it's not going to have too much data assigned to it. It shouldn't. But at the same time, this now, if you have an existing facility, if you open up the facility, first thing that it's going to do is show you data associated with that facility from a Power BI report. So that's very, very cool. So if we go to details, facility number is going to be, if I see 124, and this is my facility. This is where they do the thing. All right, facility type, you can go and specify whether it's one of those predefined types. So in this case, we're just going to say it's a building. Facility group, we're going to say it's South Africa, or whatever makes sense in your situation. The reopen phase is the current or the initial reopen phase. So assumably most of them would start off at phase 0. So let's go and select phase 0. Here you can specify all of your street addresses and latitude and longitude and all these sort of things. And this is what it then uses to plot the maps on the Power BI report. So this is pretty cool. The next tab you'll see is checklists. So we first just need to save this before it's going to populate that checklist. So it takes a minute to populate the checklist. So what it now does is it says for this facility in this reopen phase, it's now going to look at the readiness factors and then pre-populate that checklist for you that you should do for that specific phase. So it's a combination of the phase and the actual the phase and the facility and the phase that it's going to populate that checklist for you. So if we go back into the checklist, it should have done it by now, and you'll see that you can go and specify these things. So has the work zone arrangement been sorted out? Yes, it has. And you can go and specify a date for that, where that happened as well. Okay, and you can then go through the entire checklist, which I'm not going to do now. Let's just save that. So you'll see after you've created the system or the facility, you now shouldn't go and change the reopen phase on this front. And if you have the correct roles assigned, you won't be able to do that. But the idea with this now is as soon as you want to move to the next step, so let's say you're currently close, you want to move to planning, if you used to BPM in Dynamics, you would have just said, well, go to next stage. And now you'll see there's a block in there that says, you need to use the phase transitions. So what this now does is the facility manager needs to go in and say, well, I believe that this facility is ready for the next phase. So they're under transitions, you can go and say new reopen phase transition request. So now they're saying it's currently closed. So where do you want to move this to? And then assumably we'll say we want to move to the planning phase. And then you can go and assign a reviewer on who's supposed to review this. And if we now save and close this, the reviewer can actually now go in and actually approve this. So you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a section for phase transitions. So if they go into that, they'll be able to go and approve this. And once they do, so that's just going to for the transition. Right, so they can go and say, well, this is approved. And then there's going to be a workflow or a Power Automate flow that's going to kick off in the back end. That's actually going to progress that facility. So if we go back into facilities and we're going to FAC 124, you'll see that this is now in the planning phase. So this is where we can now go and do the planning related activities that you want to, or that the checklist that you need to do for the planning phase of the reopening process. Does that make sense? Any questions? Right, so this is pretty self-explanatory. They'll go through their checklist, and once they're happy that they can progress to the next level, you can then move to the transition phase again, and that'll then take the facility, throughout the various phases of the process. Right, so that's on the one side. So that's where you now manage your facilities and buildings and infrastructure and these sort of things. The next section is where the employees would now actually interact with. And this is a Canvas application, and you'll see it's developed in a mobile or in a phone layout. So this isn't using the new responsive tools yet that Jonathan announced earlier, which is going to make this a lot better and easier. But essentially, if you go into the application, you can go and request a day pass. And this is obviously very important because as you open up facilities, you're only allowed to have X amount of employees in the facility at the same time. So you obviously need to go and make provision for that. So people would need to go and book time or a slot. And to do that, they need to go and do a quick survey and go and accept the terms and conditions, which you can set up in the facilities configuration. If we go and accept that, it'll say, I need to say I agree to these 3 answers. And if I do, it's now going to say that I've got a pass for today. Right, so tomorrow I'm going to have to go through that same process, and all of those things are then logged in CDS and reported on and kept as decision support for people allowed to access the building. Okay, so if I go back to over here, the company really cares, Microsoft cares, so you can go and specify, how you're feeling. And you can go and say, yes, I'm feeling great. And that then actually stores this into CDS as well under employee sentiment. So managers can go and have a look at how the employees are feeling in general, and if everybody is starry-eyed and bushy-tailed. Right, so the next section is where you now go and log cases. So as people now contract these COVID and as things go wrong, you can go and log cases. And this will typically then be done by your safety representatives, or HR would then go and engage with these people and make sure that they get the necessary information and treatment and processes or procedures rather in order to make sure that they get cured. So if we go and say employees David van Heerden, we can go and specify. You'll see this is all pulling through from the contact. We can then go and say, just save and close this. Okay, so that's fine. And you can now step through the workflow process. You can go and say which facilities that this person get in contact with. And that's important to go and say, which other employees might have been affected, for this, from this individual. So let's go and select that. And then go and say case contact. So literally have an interview with the employee to understand who else that they have contact with, and you can go and list those so that it's easier to understand where this the COVID could have spread to. Right, so this is easy. You can just go through, make sure you've done all of these steps. So we've screened the employee. It's a medium risk assessment. Move on to the next stage. This is now monitoring. So we have provided the employee with all of the instructions. And then ultimately we can keep track of everything and make sure that this employee is healthy and ready to return to work without any complications. So all of these things are then reported on. So everything that I've showed you up to now. On the left-hand side, sorry, in this, we've got the master data. So that's just a list of employees and then case managers. So your case managers would typically be your health and safety or HR representatives. So you can go and set those up. So everything that I showed you now is surfaced in a very nice, or in 2 very nice looking reports. So the first one is the leadership report, and here it'll show you things like system at a glance. It'll show you how many incidents have there been. All of this integrates with the statistics from the World Health Organization. So you'll see the new COVID cases at the top here, new fatalities. All of these things are live information that is pulling through from the World Health Organization and other sources. So you don't have to maintain these things. It's automatically updated, as well as the reproductive number or factor that just basically says how contagious is this thing at the moment and how many people can you expect to infect if somebody is infected in your organization. So these are very...
David, those
Yeah.
connectors, it's to the John Hopkins GitHub repository that they've added up and made available. And that's the one where you've just got to make sure you set your authentication correctly to make sure that data does pull through, else you just get demo data in there.
Yeah, cool.
And the other thing, David, just a little trick which took me a long time to figure out, is if you right click on the map and you select drill down, expand to next level, that's it. Then you'll actually see the data on the map for some reason, but that's not a default. So anyway, there you go.
Okay. Well, that makes, I didn't know that. I thought my reports weren't working. All right, so at the moment, this is a whole bunch of demo as well as test data, so the reports are not accurate or anything meaningful, really. But this just gives you an idea of the kind of reports that you can then extract from this. So this allows you to go and have a look at the new COVID cases for the day. It'll show you the trends. It'll show you the total confirmed cases and all of these sort of things. So I see South Africa is now 5th, right? So on this list, although, okay, this is by location, so this isn't grouped by country. So it sees South Africa as one location, so that's why. But I think, yeah, we're 5th on the list at the moment. And then all of these are color-coded, so it's very, very nice interactive reports. I can see there's a lot of work that goes in, that went into this. All right, so things like fatal COVID cases per day, all of that, you can see the trend is coming down, especially on the new cases, so that's very good news. You can clearly see that it starts tipping, so that's fantastic news. And then the effective reproductive number or factor is also seems to be, quite stable. So I think all of that's very good news in general. Right, so facilities at a glance. So this will show you your facilities. Let me see if that works over here as well. It'll just show you some of the same information, although this will show you by facility. So there's the number of facilities per region that's now in phase 4 versus the others. So I think this is a very useful dashboard. And I can imagine for large organizations how much value there is in seeing this metric. Right, so any other questions on this report?
No, David, I just want to add that's all echo your sentiment that a lot of work has gone into getting these dashboards up and running. I mean, especially at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, the amount of customers that I worked with to get their own dashboard similar to this built was a lot of work that they needed to do. So this makes it really a lot easier to get these dashboards up and running. There's a lot of great info inside there. That's in the last couple of months took us a while to build out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think this is where Power Platform really starts making sense. Where you have the platform ready, you need a solution. This is like a very beefed up Excel template, okay, if I can call it that. In Excel, if you go and say you want a new template and you go and select a budget and you do your budget. I mean, the fact that you can just go and download this and get access to all of this goodness without having to develop all of this is absolutely staggering. And I think this is the vision for Power Platform, where Microsoft had all along. And I think it's coming together when solutions like this, you can just go and download at no cost.
Hi, David. Sorry, I just have 2 questions. So the first one is I haven't had a chance to look at the solution. The employees, they save this context, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and then the second part is that the app itself. So, I mean, the app itself, do you think you'll be able to make it available for visitors and also change it like a check-in and check-out timing event. So let's say I go to the office just for a meeting, and I'm there for an hour. I go in and I'm out. That I can literally say I left the office.
Yeah, that'll be very easy to do. So you can very easily add that to the Canvas app, and then that could just write timestamps to a ledger and just says in out. And then you can also share this with guests if your licensing allows.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So that's a very good idea, because I think that'll be able to, if people were going in and out of the office or the facility, to know who was in the office at the same time. I think that could be very valuable information as well. Yeah, so that's a great idea. All right, any other questions?
No, just a comment that the app you install, you can actually install it from App Source, and Microsoft will continue to update the app. So there's a few additional planned features, and I was trying to remember if check-in and check-out was one of them, but I would be lying if I said either way. So my only suggestion would be, if you're going to implement customizations, add them as like your own solution that gets implemented on top of the solution. So if Microsoft does update the original solution, you can still get some of those updates through, as opposed to just going in and editing the solution directly, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah.
I know one of the things they mentioned that's coming still is location management, and that's going to allow you to keep track of stock levels of sanitizer and all of these sort of things. So I didn't see anything about a check-in or check-out, but I know there's going to be a lot of additional functionality in that version as well. So it's definitely a good idea to not to go and customize the guts of this thing.
Yeah.
All right, so any other questions before we jump into the things to keep in mind for the installation? Cool, so let me share that.
So, while you're busy with it, there's no portal at the moment for this, right?
A portal to access it externally.
Yeah, so at the moment, sorry, I'm going down this path, but at the moment you've got the Power App, those type of things. But like, let's say people that don't have access to the Power App for whatever reason, as a kiosk or self sign in or something like that. I don't know.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea, but it's not there at the moment. So there's no portal built into the solution. But that should be pretty straightforward, seeing that everything is in CDS. That shouldn't be a big add, and especially if you want to build your own. And like Michael said, that doesn't need to affect anything in the existing solution. So that could be a very nice addition.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
Cool. So Manuel, this face that you don't drag me into this. Oh, is that when somebody said read the manual? Okay, all right, follow.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. When Jonathan dragged me into this situation.
Yeah, sorry, man, I missed that. And its jokes aren't that good 20 minutes after the fact, so I apologize. I'm sure it was a lot funnier back then. All right, so basically, let's quickly go into the installation. So the installation of this is fairly simple, but there are one or two things that just to keep in mind, and I'm just going to quickly run through those. Right, can everybody see my screen?
Affirmative, Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the URL again. So it's aka.ms/RTW, or you can just go and search for Power Apps Return to Workplace with confidence or without confidence. Both will find it. All right, so if you go, so the installation went well. There are a few things that were a bit of an issue. And the first one, you'll see that there's an onion you know, so that's the thing that made you cry a bit. And then the second one is just the solution. So the first one says that determine where the displayed URL is pointing to in the common data service environment. Now, I'm just going to share my entire screen so I can just flip between this and the browser. Otherwise, it's going to be confusing. All right, so if we go into the documentation, I had it open already. You'll see that over here where they, after you've installed the Power BI dashboards, you connect to your data source, you then go and tell it where your dynamics, what your URL for that environment is. And then immediately after that, they give you this little sentence where they tell you determine where the display URL is pointing to in the common data service environment. And then it says, if it's pointing to common data service, then do something. If it's pointing to, if it's not pointing to common data service, then do something else. And my brain gave me an error when I tried to understand this piece over here. But essentially, all that you do is just go and, in the URL, if it's pointing to a CSV or something that's not your Dynamics instance or your environment, then use anonymous and public. And if it's pointing to CDS, then just use Microsoft login and organizational. All right, so it wasn't a big deal, but just when I read that, my brain was, and that's the same thing that Jonathan mentioned earlier. So Jonathan, how did you guys get around that eventually?
It wasn't that one that we were having the problem with. It was the connection to the GitHub repository. So if you scroll a little bit down, where it's talking about the authentication to the John Hopkins site, I think it's those ones. It's just a bit further down. I can't remember where it is. No, it's definitely further back up when you are busy with your connections.
Yeah. So when you open them for the first time, then when you go and set up where's that? It's over here.
Yeah, the authentication methods. Yeah, those ones there where you're connecting up to those web accounts.
Okay.
Those ones needed to be public. The configuration, if I remember correctly. Mark, do you remember offhand what it was?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same thing that David's mentioning, is though those ones there, like what I did is I said that they were anonymous to everything other than CDS there. So Azure Blob, web, all of those are anonymous, but I didn't choose the drop-down box of public. So that's what messed me up. So I just didn't read the instructions, to be honest. So yeah.
Right, cool. So yeah, my brain gave me an error. So the thing is just click next, and then it's going to just cycle through those different connections. And then I tried to understand what they were telling me over here before I click next. And this determine where the display URL is pointing to in common data service. And then it says, if it's pointing to common data service, then I'm like, what? So I read the documentation, but I didn't understand it. Right, so the next thing is when you embed the Power BI report in the model-driven app. So there they're talking about creating a solution, and I think this could be confusing a little bit. So during step 4, for the guys that are not that familiar with solutions and Dynamics specifically, over here what they're telling you to do is to extract a solution or to create a new solution, but they don't mention that, you know, this isn't really an important part of the process. So this is really a temporary solution. You're just doing this to get the configuration files out of the environment. So what you name it doesn't matter. You can actually go and delete it afterwards as well. There's no importance in any of that. So you can just go and name it anything, extract it, and then use it to import the configuration or the customization file in again. So yeah, I'm just saying create a new temporary solution, name it whatever you like. Doesn't matter. You can delete it afterwards as well. Then also on embedding the Power BI report, they're saying that you should go and open the customization file. So that's on step 8, and that's file. Well, that's fine. Other for the fact that there's 2 commas there, but I'll log a problem there, of a bug report there. But essentially, you go and download this XML file, and then they give you an example, But all you need to go and do is just update these properties in that XML file with whatever is in your Power BI report. So this is not difficult, but it's just if you don't know what you're looking for, then it could be a bit of a curveball. I think that the next one might catch you if you're not familiar with XML. So essentially, they tell you to go and copy the URL from the Power BI report. And Michael, I don't know if you guys had this issue as well, where in that URL there are ampersands. And that is a special character in XML. And obviously, when you try and import that into Dynamics, it's going to tell you that it can't because the XML content isn't using a valid schema. So then you need to go and just go and escape the ampersands with an ampersand and then AMP semicolon to make it acceptable for XML in order to import the solution back into Dynamics or back into the Power Platform. Right, and then the next one is when it gets to the security roles, in the documentation they are saying that you need to go and assign the roles to the individuals. But in a large organization, that's simply not playable. I don't see that as a viable option at all. So what we recommend for that is to actually just go and set up teams and then assign Azure groups to those teams in Power Platform and then assign the roles to those teams. Now that's fine and that's no issue, but there is a little bit of a problem. I don't know if you've noticed that in the team, in the new interface, in the Power Platform Admin Center, if you go and have a look at the team, the Manage Role button isn't available. So you have to go back into the classic interface in order to go and set up that role. Otherwise, you can't do it through the modern interface. All right, so other than these few, like 6 things, I think the installation is very easy. Really not a lot of things to stumble upon or to stumble over rather. And I think this is a brilliant solution. Any other questions on this specifically?
No, that looks good. Thanks, David, for showing that off. I think it helps paint a good picture. There are lots of partners that are busy working on it, but if you are having a look at it and you guys do need help, reach out. We've been through it, so happy to assist you if you want to get it implemented and rolled out. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks, David. Okay, so next, Mike, got some questions for the guys?
Well, in traditional Michael's cookbook style, and for those that haven't seen this is kind of, Michael's pains that he has along the line when he's building stuff. And then I thought, hey, well, let's share this because maybe someone will have a similar pain. So I've got 2 cookbooks today. One has a little bit of an ingredient, the other one has a lot of ingredients. But I'll try and get through them as fast as I can because it's getting on, and I know you all, have families and lives to go to. So the first cookbook issue that I had this last week is I wanted to count the number of rows. Specifically, I wanted to know how many contacts I had in a contacts entity in CDS. And, you use this function called count rows, and it doesn't work. So, I've got this function here. Let's just go here. Let's look at the text property. So I'm doing a count rows on my contacts entity in CDS, and basically it tells me count rows is not delegable, this yellow exclamation mark we see too often. And basically it's telling me that even with CDS, okay, I could expect this, for example, from a SharePoint list, but even from CDS, you can't offload the count rows function to the back end for it to calculate it and give you the response. What it's actually going to do is it's going to return all the rows, in quotes, all the rows that it can, and then it'll count them. So it returns all 500 into the client, and then it counts them. So even though I have way more than 500, it tells me there's 500 because that's the max that it can return. And And I'm like, oh, that's not cool. And I went and I searched docs.microsoft.com and it said, yeah, count rows is not delegable. I'm like, no, man, no, that's not cool. and I was then playing in the advanced settings under preview features. And I found this little preview here called enhanced delegation for the common data service. And it says the following functions are delegated to CDS, count rows. So I switched this on and I saved my app. And then I closed my app. Just when you thought it would just work, eh? And I reopened my app. Come on. My famous app called Dem. Ta-da! And there we go. So, hey, sometimes it's worthwhile just going and checking out those preview features to see if there's something you've been struggling with for some time, and actually there's a preview feature that enables you to overcome it. So yeah, there we go.
That makes a lot of problems go away.
Yes, it makes. I was trying to play with some charting, and I needed to know the count of how many records I had. So that's where the issue came in. And to try and get around that, you go and people are saying, no, you have this flow that counts. It's like all this. Hey man, just go turn on a preview feature. Problem solved.
But that's very new, Mike. That must be like in the last couple of weeks.
I don't know. It's there. I turned it on.
I think it's in release wave 2 that's coming out at the moment, if I remember correctly, or release wave 1, one of the two.
Awesome.
Okay, so tomorrow when you've just got 10 minutes of nothing to do, just go check out those preview features. There's something in there, I'm sure, that you've been struggling with. That's just a tick box away. Okay, the other one is way longer. This is a massive cookbook, which I'm certainly not going to get time to go through today, but I wanted to share this with you. It's much more technical. It's solving a problem where I needed a Power App to talk to an on-premises web service. And the on-premises web service is an old web service. It only returns SOAP, so XML. And I wanted the data in REST because I also wanted to use it in Power Apps and a few other places. And if you don't know, there's several ways you can connect a Power App to on-premises. If it's connecting to like a data, so you want to connect to SQL Server or Oracle or something at a data level, then you might look at the Power Platform Data Gateway. I'm not going into what the data gateway is and how it all works, but that's certainly one way you could do it. I'm connecting to an API and I needed some conversion to happen. Some other issues like, actually, this is a real world scenario, a customer already actually had the web service published to the internet. So in theory, I could just connect to it, but they wanted to know what IP range I would be connecting from. And to give the whole Power Platform or Power Query IP range, that's massive. So it became a little bit complicated. So in the end, I went for this architecture that actually works very, very well. And basically what it does is your Power App goes to Azure API Manager, and Azure API Manager is essentially a proxy. It's the man in the middle. And then that proxy then connects to the on-premises API. And the reason why this is quite cool is because this thing in the middle called Azure API Manager can convert XML to JSON. So it makes it like old SOAP to REST. It can add caching, so you don't call that on-premises web service too many times if you don't need to. It can expose only one IP address for the on-premises firewall to protect. It can add certificate-based authentication, Azure AD authentication, all these amazing features, logging and all this stuff. So I thought actually this would be a great way to do it, and it works darn well. I'm not going to go through all the detail of how it works. I'm going to give you a few little screenshots And hey, if you want to connect to me offline to know more detail, or if you want, like, I can share the detailed steps I can go and do this. And essentially, it's a 4-step process. Step 1, set up the Azure API Manager in Azure to publish your on-premises API, to be that proxy. And then you go and create a custom connector in the Power Platform, essentially to consume this API, but the API endpoint is now Azure API Manager, this man in the middle. And as I said, I'll share all these slides with you and the full detail. The example that I share here is actually not on premises, because I couldn't give you the real stuff that I did, but I just said, hey, what happens if this public weather API, so this is public weather API, if that was considered on premises, how would I connect to it? So that's the demo that I go through in connecting to that API. So this here is essentially showing you in Azure API Manager, you create a new API. And then if I can learn how to drag my screen across, and then you go and say, hey, this is the backend API I'm going to connect to, the weather demo endpoint. Community-open. So this is the public endpoint of the web service that's representing on premises. And then what my app will connect to, in other words, the Power App, it will connect to this thing here. So it'll come into this, but it's actually going to that. And then there's some cool stuff you can go and do around how you're actually going to connect to the back end, certificates, username, passwords, etc. And this is where in Azure API Manager you can go and set up rules to transform the data as it comes through from XML to JSON. Go and set up caching rules, hide query string parameters so you can make it simpler to call than the actual real API in the back end. You then go and create an open API specification file. So this is how you describe your new API. And this is actually a Power Platform feature where you can then go and create what's called a custom connector. So in Power Apps or Power Platform, you go and create a custom connector, which now connects to Azure API Manager. And I'm not going through the detail, but essentially what that means is now inside of Power Apps, I want a data source, and my data source here is called my weather service. So you'll see that over here. So I'm adding a connection to my weather service, which is the Azure API. And when I use my weather service, I can say, hey, I want to get the current weather for Johannesburg, and then it goes and gets me the data as a data table. And this API supports lots of different things. So I can also get the maximum temperature that it's going to be. So there it's coming back as the maximum temperature. So this just little sample shows how I can, from Power Apps, connect via Azure API Manager as that proxy, that that thing in the middle, which then can connect to an on-premises API or actually any third-party API, and then I can consume that from my Power App. So that's a cookbook that's got quite a lot to it. If anyone's interested, yeah, I'll put my email address in the IM window now, and just reach out to me. I can share the sample with you. And I've got a few other examples of how you can connect to on-premises as well, different ways to do it, but this one and this scenario work pretty well. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you.
That's awesome, Mark. Thanks for sharing.
Cool. So I had a scenario in the past 2 weeks where I'm trying to get a response header from an API into Power Apps. And that turns out that that's not possible yet. So that'll do magic for that, because now I can use the API Manager to take that response header, put that in the body, I'm sure, and then give that to Power Apps.
100%. Exactly.
Quite strange, because Power Automate, you can consume response headers, but not in Power Apps. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I used Power Automate as a workaround in the meantime, but I like this API Manager. That's very nice and clean.
Yeah, and it also does stuff like that backend web service that I was calling, and I'm sorry to get so technical, but I wanted to consume it in other places as well, not just Power Apps. So by exposing it via Azure API Manager, I can consume it in Power Apps, Power Automate, but also just custom code and some other things. And I needed a cross-site scripting header to be added to allow me to do cross-site scripting, but they wouldn't change the backend web service. So I could just do it in API Manager, add that cross-site scripting header into it as well. So yeah, you can go and really massage the data coming in and the data going out so that it's more usable without actually changing the existing web service.
That is awesome.
So the interesting thing there as well, what happened was that the API Manager performed better than the web services. So that was quite
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So there you go.
awesome.
So sorry, super technical, that second one, but just as a high level, I hope you get the idea, and I put my email in the IM window. Welcome to reach out if you want any more info.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for sharing. It's
Fantastic.
definitely going to be handy, especially when you're busy with one of those solutions. You're going to remember, hey, Mike did something. Let's reach out to him and see if he can help, or just watch these videos again.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Okay, so that's it. Unless there are any general questions and answers for anyone. David, anything you want to add from your side?
No, all good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I see some people have registered for the Power Virtual Agents. We've got about 10 registrations so far. It looks like it is going to be 1 or 2 evening sessions. So just keep an eye open for that. I will leave the survey up on the Meetup site for a couple of days, and then we'll probably have something in the next couple of weeks. Okay. So just one quick round to everyone on the call. Any questions, comments, anything that you are wanting to see inside of these sessions, or any general feedback?
So I think one thing we spoke about is possibly arranging the September meetup to start a little bit earlier. And I know in the past that some of the members of the meetup asked if that was a possibility. And so just from the people on this call, what would you say if we said that the one in September is going to start at 4 o'clock instead of 6? So
well,
maybe,
I think we can.
Yeah.
What I think we can do is put up a poll as well, and then we can see what people respond to it. Let me just see. There are some chats coming through. Some people are saying all good. Even if we just start at 5 o'clock, maybe just to move it an hour earlier, might be worthwhile. But I think let me put a form together and we can just do a quick survey and then get the feel from the team.
Perfect. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Perfect. So with that, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time to attend these sessions. I hope you're getting a lot of value on it. As usual, this recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I will post the link in the chat window soon. But thanks everyone for joining, and have a good evening further.
Thanks everybody. It was awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
Thanks
everyone.
very much.
Have a good evening.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Cheers.
everyone.
Cheers.